from an undisclosed location in the Great Western Desert in the land of the free and autonomous Native American people. The 2024 presidential campaign in it's time to return all US land back to their rightful owners. This is the Ben Zion Podcast.
Techno-communism will win.
Welcome back to the Techno-Communism Show. I'm going to do a kind of a little self-criticism of something that I talked about relating to tech not too long ago, or something that I glossed over on this Techno-Communism podcast, and that is the bad treatment of workers who are developing these particular kinds of chatbot services like ChatGPT, which I no longer use because I found one that's moderately better. It has a large number of tokens that it can process, for one thing. I've talked about Claude.ai a few times, and I don't know if I really always mentioned that it can basically think about twice as many things as ChatGPT, or more, 100,000, I think, if I'm not mistaken, basically 100,000 words that it can keep in its short-term memory and discuss with you. So you can just upload a book and be like, or a novella, and be like, tell me what happened here, and what's that all about? And it'll tell you. Pick that one thing out. That's a little more than ChatGPT is able to do. In the other areas where there's trade-offs, they're more particular to certain kinds of professions. ChatGPT has a suite of products that are pretty particular to people who work in IT. For other people, I would say Claude is a better option. It has a little bit less in the ways of barriers to entry. They're not trying to throw up any paywalls at you at all, in fact. And it's just a little easier to use. So I've stopped using ChatGPT, and I've been using Claude.ai. I watched a few interviews with their CEO, who I guess was the kind of person who was less public-facing than some CEOs of this kind, but he started doing press quite recently, and I watched a few of his talks, and yeah, he's not a communist. This is for an organization that was basically founded in response to how OpenAI is not very much in the open source vein anymore. The people that work there, they might be copy leftists in a loose sense of the word, but they're mostly just using a lot of just kind of vile corporate language. The CEO and other people that I've seen from this organization. But nevertheless, it is a little bit better, just in the same vein. There's a labor renaissance in the United States to some degree. It needs to be a lot more. But I'm a communist. There's a certain point at which communists and labor entities might be at cross purposes in a world that now has a people's government, and private wealth has been abolished. These are things that have been done. Labor organizations are sometimes actually a little bit to the right of the good workings of that planned economy in a certain sense, but that's no reason to prevent the necessary protections of workers that need to be undertaken in the present day. But I digress. So I wanted to walk something back, so to speak, in a small way, or do a program where I talk about this problem with ChatGPT specifically and other products like it. And one thing that's happening that kind of negates this is that there's becoming this large body of trained data, and it's being some of it is an awful lot of it was no longer derived from original human content. So it's which creates a greater possibility of what are called AI hallucinations, which is just bad information and bad premises with the AI leading to problematic outcomes from the work product that you request of it, or its various tasks. But the reason that I mentioned that at all is because so when ChatGPT came out, this was something people were talking about in 2021, 2020, even before ChatGPT really started making waves. The problem itself of machine learning companies hiring people that are in the many thousands that are not being paid a living wage. This is an unfortunate practice. It should not merely be called an unfortunate practice. Again, I'm kind of doing this whitewashing thing again. This is fundamentally a wrong part of capitalism, wherein people are exploited in this way and across borders. People in the imperial core will pretty particularly hire people who are forced into this kind of metric based employment, wherein they have to take no breaks and work in an breakneck speed, with every aspect of what they're doing being micromanaged, a little bit like what it's like to work for Amazon, um, um, and um, and they're not being paid. They're being paid a tiny fraction of what people doing this sort of work in the Western world would be getting paid. So people in Kenya get making $2 an hour, or people in other parts of the world making even a little less in some cases. Not a great thing. And I was dismissive of this in a way when I talked about this in the past. I said, "Oh, it's not that big of a deal because it's not that many people relative to the number of people using it." That's the wrong approach to this kind of thing. Exploitation of any kind of this kind is bad. And I've been watching more talks with Timnit Gebru, who on another show I said that maybe she's an Eritrean Ethiopian, so she's maybe ethnically Eritrean, but grew up in Ethiopia, and she also speaks um, English with no accent, and she's also a tech presenter of the highest order. She's also somebody who I started to say a moment ago. I mentioned that I didn't really think she was hard leftist, but the more I listen to her, I think that she's basically communist, just not broadcasting that fact, which is itself a thing that people should do, right? This planet is dying because of a lack of will to create a humane and sustainable economic system. So the very least that you could do, aside from educating yourself on these things, is to say, I am willing to stand up for a humane and sustainable economic system and tell others that. And that is what it is to say I am a communist. But people working in some profession might have good reason to bury the lead there. I won't say good reason, but they're forced to, living in the fascist USA or the imperial core. And Timnit Gebru was somebody who came at a pretty young age from Ethiopia to the United States and became a high-level tech professional, and is perhaps best known as one of a few famous tech whistleblowers, the Google whistleblower, who one of a few who said Google basically said Google shouldn't be doing all of this military-industrial complex bullshit. I don't want to work here anymore, and then gave information up about them. So definitely one of those 1 in 1,000 tech people, or maybe 1 in 400 tech people, who's not just an out-and-out fascist sympathizer or fascist. I say 1 in 1,000 futurists and transhumanists are not some kind of fascist. Tech people, I'll give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt and say some number greater than 1 in 100, maybe 1 in 300, 1 in 500. It's still very bad. These are all fucking fascists. So I've been watching her stuff, and I recommend that you perhaps try and support her organizations. She's doing good work to see that technology is used in a responsible way with respect to people like these exploited Kenyan workers that made mention of. Another overblown concern with AI. AI causes real harm. Let's focus on that over the end of humanity hype. And you see the end of humanity hype from the usual suspects, Nick Bostrom, Eliezer Yudkowsky, who's even worse than him as a thinker on these things. But both of these people basically selling an establishment bill of goods, giving you this 1-2 punch, wherein in both the left and the right hook of this 1-2 punch, AI is regarded as inevitable, which it's not, right? I think anything that's made by humans could be stopped with the proper steps being taken. This statement that AI is inevitable is a self-fascistic thing. But in this 1-2 punch, the promise of AI and in often bizarre and overstated claims is the right punch. And the left punch is people like Eliezer Yudkowsky just saying moronic things to scare you. And all of this is kind of all focusing your attention on this idea that AI is inevitable. And I'm a Marxist tech accelerationist, so I want AI to be inevitable. but I want it to be inevitable in the sense of uniting humanity to common purpose and doing good things, and not what's being done with it now, which is generally militarism and unsustainable consumerism and just utter fucking insanity. Um, and that's a little bit what this article from Emily Bender talks about. This is from Scientific American, not the world's worst publication, nor the best. Effective regulation of AI needs grounded science that investigates real harms, not glorified press releases about existential risks. Yeah, X-risk people are usually kind of clowns. Wrongful arrests and expanding surveillance, dragnet, defamation, and deepfake pornography are all actually existing dangers, so-called artificial intelligence tools, currently on the market. That, and not the imagined potential to wipe out humanity, is a real threat from artificial intelligence. And even that is kind of soft-selling this. The surveillance dragnet and these other related functions of the AI-driven fascist West, the tech-driven fascist West, greatly greatly overpower some of those other concerns. And that should really be the focus of the article. It should be techno-fascism, maybe not necessarily these other things. Defamation is not great. Pornography is highly problematic, but those things are not killing the planet. Beneath the hype for many AI firms, their technology already enables routine discrimination in housing, criminal justice, and healthcare, as well as the spread of hate speech and misinformation in non-English languages. Already, algorithmic management programs subject workers to run-of-the-mill wage theft, and these programs are becoming more prevalent. Nevertheless, in May, the Nonprofit Center for AI Safety released a statement co-signed by hundreds of industry leaders. We've done 3 or 4 shows specifically about this already, including OpenAI's CEO Sam Altman warning of the risk of extinction from AI, which it asserted was akin to nuclear war and pandemics. And again, I wouldn't go so far as Scientific American to be dismissive of that, except to say that the problem is not technology. The problem is Western fascism. The problem is the capitalist regime, the far-right capitalist regimes that we are forced to live under in the West and that we force upon the rest of the world. These are the problematic things: militarism and so forth. And if you remove those from the equation, we would be looking at the prospect of artificial general intelligence and saying, why? What wonderful things we will do. Not, this is going to accelerate climate change and kill us that much sooner, or this is going to lead to itself something like nuclear brinksmanship. In a world not run by elitist lunatics, you would not even be having those concerns. And but people like these hundreds of tech luminaries like Ilya Sutkowski and Nick Bostrom have a very particular interest in not criticizing that system, because that's the system that they have come to thrive in. It's a system that where they make those sweet 5-figure book deals and so forth. However much Nick Bostrom gets paid to do this shit, so he can't criticize that. So they make up this science fiction story wherein this alien force is a threat and not the fascists who are using it inappropriately. Altman had previously alluded to such a risk in a congressional hearing, suggesting that generative AI tools could go quite wrong. And in July, executives from AI companies met with Joe Biden and made several toothless voluntary commitments to curtail this most significant sources of AI risks, hinting at existential threats over real ones. Yeah, this is a misdirection, right? There are real problems with at every turn with a for-profit set of systems. But those are almost always hand-waved by the ruling elites, and these other fishy narratives are created, are offered to the public in their place. Corporate AI labs justify this posturing with pseudoscientific research reports that misdirect regulatory attention to such imaginary scenarios using fear-mongering terminology such as existential risk. Yeah, X-risk people, for the most part, they're not talking about the most credible, by far the most credible existential risk, which is climate change. And there are people who are, their job is basically to confuse that problem by making up some other stories about other problems. And yeah, X-risk, if you ever meet an X-risk expert in real life, just kick them in the fucking stomach. That's the thing to do. The broader public and regulatory agencies must not fall for the science fiction maneuver. Rather, we look to scholars and activists who practice peer review and have pushed back on AI hype in order to understand its detrimental effects here and now. Because the term AI is ambiguous, it makes having clear discussions more difficult. In one sense, it is the name of a subfield of computer science. In another, it can refer to the computing techniques developed in that subfield, most of which are now focused on pattern matching based on large data sets, the generation of new media based on those patterns. This even just the word intelligence, as I've said on the show many times, is not as meaningful as you would want in talking about advanced computing tools. Finally, in marketing, copy, and pitch and startup pitch decks, the term AI serves as magic fairy dust that will supercharge your business. Yeah, that's mostly all of these people care about, not building anything actually good or useful. um, with OpenAI's release of ChatGPT and Microsoft's incorporation of the tool into its Bing search late last year, text synthesis machines have emerged as the most prominent AI systems. Large language models such as ChatGPT extrude remarkably fluent and coherent seeming text, but have no understanding of what the text means, let alone the ability to reason. To suggest so is to impute comprehension where there is none, something done purely on faith by AI boosters. I don't necessarily agree with that idea that this is an incense. Nothing in any creature that I've observed strikes me that is so far above that. A bird having a little kind of birdie brain that's pretty complex and able to communicate with other birds is doing some pretty elegant bird communication that we don't probably understand. We have a little bit bigger brains and maybe, arguably, a more sophisticated communication, and that larger collection of neurons kind of pushes us over the edge of being able to build sophisticated things. So it does seem to just be an effect of having X number of connections operating that finally maybe allows you to write 5,000 words essays of some coherence. This is humanism, in my view, to say that's. I don't think that we should be thinking of any AI as deserving of human rights. I think that's itself a Trojan horse, as I've said on other shows. But this humanistic idea that our minds are so different from theirs, it's giving us more credit than we deserve. These systems are instead the equivalent of enormous magic 8 balls that we can play with by framing the prompts. We send them as questions, such that we can make sense of their output as answers. Unfortunately, that output can seem so plausible that without a clear indication of its synthetic origins, it becomes a noxious and insidious pollutant in our information ecosystem. Not only do we risk mistaking a synthetic text for reliable information, but also that non-information reflects and amplifies the biases encoded in its training data, in this case, every kind of bigotry exhibited on the internet. Moreover, the synthetic text sounds authoritative despite its lack of citation back to real sources. The longer the synthetic text spill continues, the worse off we are, because it gets harder to find trustworthy sources and harder to trust them when we do. Yeah, that's correct. Nevertheless, the people selling this technology propose that text synthesis machines could fix various holes in our social fabric: the lack of teachers in K through 12 education, the inaccessibility of healthcare for low-income people, and the dearth of legal aid for people who cannot afford lawyers, just to name a few. And the first and third one, there's some arguments to be made for some significant changes to those systems based on the better use of these technologies, which is not going to be done because none of the people changing the legal system or changing the education system are people that have the interests of a humane system at heart, so that they'll make it worse. But socialists actually could change those things using advanced computing for the better. The healthcare system should not be run in the way it is at all, and so the idea of advanced computing being some kind of band-aid on that is, I think, a form of violence. We need a public health service and not a for-profit enterprise of any kind ever to do with health or wellness. In addition to not really helping those in need, deployment of this technology actually hurts workers. The systems rely on enormous amounts of training data that are stolen without compensation from the artists and authors who created it in the first place. And like this, their kind of treatment of public health, they make mention of the problem. They don't really talk about the solutions because Scientific American, it's American, so kind of fascist friendly. They're not socialists. They're not people who want to build a humane and sustainable economic system. They're not people who want to take that further still in ways that I often describe on this program. In the techno-communist mandate, you'll see, I'm not going to give you that breakdown again, but you'll see that graphic at the end. Finally, employers are looking for ways to cut costs by leveraging automation, laying off people from previously stable jobs, and then hiring them back as lower paid workers to correct the output of the automated systems. And that's something that you should be in a gulag for doing. This can be seen most clearly in the current actors and writers' strikes in Hollywood, where grotesquely overpaid moguls scheme to buy eternal rights to use AI replacements of actors for the price of a day's work, and on a gig basis, hire writers piecemeal to revise the incoherent scripts churned out by AI. Yeah, I was thinking about doing a show about making an AI-generated film because this has become an actual possibility just in the last month or so, maybe a little more. I done talked about this already a little bit on this podcast. So I'm a little divided on some of this because I want to use this technology to make a high end product with just myself. But on the other hand, almost all of this is problematic and at best exploitative. Is more accurate. AI-related policy must be science-driven and built on relevant research, but too many AI publications come from corporate labs or from academic groups that receive disproportionate industry funding. Much is junk science. It is non-reproducible, hides behind trade secrecy, is full of hype, and uses evaluation methods that lack construct validity. That is the property that a test measures what it purports to measure. Some recent remarkable examples include a 155-page preprint paper entitled Sparks of Artificial General Intelligence, early experiments with ChatGPT 4 from Microsoft research which purports to find intelligence in the output of ChatGPT 4, one of OpenAI's text synthesis machines, and OpenAI's own technical reports on GPT 4, which claims, among other things, that OpenAI systems have the ability to solve new problems that are not found in their training data. No one can test these claims, however, because OpenAI refuses to provide access to or even a description of those data. Meanwhile, AI doomers who try to focus, there's the 1-2 punch. Overstated claims, and then AI doomers, all in service to a narrative wherein AI is inevitable and but also pretty firmly fascistic, and in service to this evil empire and Western fascism more generally. Meanwhile, AI doomers who try to focus the world's attention on the fantasy of all-powerful machines possibly going rogue, destroying all of humanity, cite this junk rather than research on the actual harms companies are perpetrating in the real world in the name of creating AI. Yeah, and we should say about the doomer that what they're doing, in my view, is not just saying not elitist nonsense meant to confuse in this more general sense that they've described. But in my view, what they're doing is creating a more fascistic narrative to drown out what would otherwise be the narrative around this sort of thing, which is to use advanced computing to build a humane and sustainable economic system. Advanced computing and emerging technology are the most powerful tools that have ever existed, and they could be used to completely remake the institutions of our world. And this is something that is more necessary now than ever because we have a planet that is dying if we don't do precisely this kind of thing. These AI doomers are people. They're people who will use words like anti-authoritarian, right? Or I'm against totalitarianism, or I'm against authoritarianism, which is almost always being used unless you literally are being held prisoner by someone, which is the case for a disproportionate and grotesque number of U.S. citizens. But unless you're literally being held prisoner by someone, you shouldn't be using this word to talk about other countries. This is a weasel word of an pretty particularly anti-communist kind, and these AI doomers are people who will write hundreds of thousands of words just on this weasel concept of protecting you from potential dictators. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but the point is that we make up these science fiction narratives about world-destroying AI because they see this power of changing this unsustainable system, and they see that people could very well, in short order, unite to that end, and they want to poison that well, and that's why they create all of these narratives. That's why this narrative of tech being inevitable, but also being a necessary fascistic evil, is so overwhelming in all of these conversations. And we urge policymakers to instead draw on solid scholarship that investigates the harms and risks of AI and the harms caused by delegating authority to AI systems. So even they are giving a nod to this bogus authoritarian fear-mongering, which include the unregulated accumulation of data. The surveillance state as it exists in the fascist West does suffer from those problems. But the people who are AI doomers and they don't care about ending those problems. They care about confusing you about a hypothetical problem, or kind of just spewing out a ton of dog whistles about China, um, um, which include the unregulated accumulation of data, and computing power, climate costs of model training and inference, not great, damage to the welfare state and the disempowerment of the poor. It's a race to the bottom in this labor freefall, as well as the intensification of policing against black and indigenous families, also a very real effect of recent decades in this emerging fascist surveillance state. Solid research in this domain, including social science and theory building, and solid policy based on that research, will keep the focus on the people hurt by this technology. Yeah. No mention of really changing the system or even fixing too many of these problems. Just a passing reference to some of the problems themselves. But there you go. That's the liberal way. A little bit about um, this kind of creative question of making films. I made a comic book using AI, using AI art generators and AI text generation. I had already had written longhand a a, um, um, a draft of that story, but a lot of it, an awful lot of this came from this particular set of tools. And so these tools are changing pretty quickly. This is how to master mid-journey AI character consistency, the ultimate guide by Julian Horsley. This is from geekygadgets.com. In the realm of character design, maintaining consistency is a crucial aspect that often poses a challenge. This guide, created by tokenized AI, provides an in-depth exploration of this subject, offering innovative solutions to ensure character consistency throughout your projects using a variety of different AI tools. Yeah, it's hard to make a comic book with characters that look very similar, have the same face, or have an arc of movement along those lines. Um, um, but it's gotten easier just since I started working on this sort of thing. And unfortunately, all the things in which it's gotten easier for you if you're the person who has $500 a month to spend on this list of 30 services that you'll be wanting to use. If you don't have $500 to spend on that kind of stuff, fuck you, right? You don't get to use any of this stuff. And that's kind of where I am with this movie now. So I should start maybe crowdfunding to make this movie. But I don't trust any of you. You're all assholes. uh, um, but I actually am putting together a plan to do this. But yeah, I do need money for this. Um, uh, well, I can recommend this Geeky Gadgets article, but I'm not going to go into any more into this creative and design stuff. It's good stuff, but I'll save it for another show.